Hello there and welcome to my channel. My name is Stephen. Today we're going to talk about Bird Box. Yes, the Christmas blockbuster on Netflix that everyone's been talking about, directed by Susanna Bier and starring Sandra Bullock. It's been on the lips of every single film fan in the country. Now, whether you like it or not, my personal opinion is a little bit, if I'm being totally honest, it's definitely got people talking, but yet there's still been absolutely loads of plot points and loads of genuinely baffling moments that left viewers like myself a little bit confused. So today I'm going to take a closer look at 10 talking points from Bird Box. I just want to say as well, obviously because we're discussing the film, there's going to be some pretty big plot spoilers in this, so if you haven't seen the film yet, go and watch it, pause this video, come back in an hour and a half, and then come and join me for the rest of the video. If you have watched it, we'll just carry on watching. And we're going to start with plot point number 1. How did Sandra Bullock's Mallory and the rest of the survivors actually avoid seeing these creatures, monsters, or whatever they are in the first place? While the world was crashing around, quite literally around Mallory, with a sister obviously committing suicide and loads of other randoms jumping in front of buses and setting themselves on fire right open in the middle of the street. How did she not see them? Are there some defined rules that we don't know about? Does it take a bit of time? Are certain demons only appearing in front of certain people? What were these rules and why were they never explained to us? How did she be in the street for a whole minute yet somehow managed to survive this mass suicide? It was never explained. And on to point number 2, one that I've been thinking about since I watched the film. How did these people be chosen to spread the message from these weird demon-like creatures? What was so special about them other than their mental instability, I would guess, putting it politely? Why was it them that were chosen to spread the message of these weird demon-like creatures, and how come they were immune to it as well? It never really added up. It never really explained either. The eye colour changes, what was all that about? What was the significance of that? Were they seeing something different to the rest of the people, and why did it not affect them in the same way? What were the rules? Was it because they had a warped sense of the world? Did they see things in a different light to the rest of the people? If anything, it played on the idea that crazy people are very different to us, and it did seem a little bit cheap and derivative, if I'm being honest with you. Point 3, what exactly did constitute a safe barrier between these weird monster things and someone's eyes? It was very vague throughout the film. Was it a thin piece of fabric hanging over a window? Was it a computer screen? Was it a bush or a bunch of leaves over a window? According to the film, loads of different variations this thing seemed to work, but the amount of times Mallory and the rest of the cast walked into a room with only a thin piece of parchment sealing them from almost certain death, it didn't really seem to make sense. Just personally, if I was about to be killed by a suicidal demon, I'd probably be painting the windows black. Just an idea. And on to point number 4. During their survival run to the supermarket, where it's quite categorically said that space and time was at a premium, why did Sandra Bullock decide, before knowing their abilities, to bring 3 live birds back in a cage that filled up all the trolley? It made absolutely no sense that during an apocalypse and during mass suicide, she thought those cute birds might be quite fun. At this point, there'd been no indication that they were actually going to be useful, and it didn't really make any sense why she decided to suddenly adopt a bunch of birds as a pet. Was there some kind of higher being telling her to do this? Was she suddenly overcome with compassion for a bunch of birds despite not really caring about the idea of having a baby? It didn't really line up that suddenly she'd love having 3 small, annoying, loud birds, but not having a baby. It didn't really make sense to me. On to question 5. Why did she call the kids boy and girl? It made no sense that over the course of 5 years, despite getting in a very attached relationship with Tom, she had no emotional attachment to call them anything other than boy or girl. What kind of message did that send to those kids? It didn't really make sense that she was willing to open up so closely to one character and get in a committed long-term relationship, but yet she still couldn't give those kids a name. And that Tom, such a compassionate, caring partner as well for those 5 years, still was happy with them being called boy and girl. What kind of person does that? There was no justification. She didn't attempt to explain it at the end, and it was just a bit weird if we're being totally honest. And on to that 5-year gap. What was going on during that 5 years? Did they just live in that house and be totally fine for 5 years? Was nothing happening? Was there no attempt at contact with the outside world? Was there no attempts at breaking? Was there no more information learned? Did they just live happily ever after for 5 years? Did no more people try and attack them? It was a huge gap that we were just supposed to accept and just move on from. It was a little bit weak if I'm being honest. On to point number 7. Why did the survivors in the home for the blind willingly broadcast their location, fully well knowing that there was a bunch of people desperate to have them killed by these weird demon creature type things? What was the point in that? It endangered all the lives of the people who lived there, including a whole host of children. A lot of people were put at risk by constantly broadcasting this signal. Now, a lot of people will say, yep, general human empathy comes into play here. I agree with this, but given us 5 years of broadcasting, or at least a few months you presume, surely some people would have found that location by now and offered a real threat to their livelihood livelihood. It just seemed a little bit naive to me to broadcast their current whereabouts to the world, and especially inviting a couple of strangers that they had no idea if they were telling the truth or not. And also, can we talk about the birds once again? How did they actually know what was going on, and how did they actually survive a trip down the rapids in a small box where they were thrown into the water? Now, we know birds are very capable in the air, but are they good swimmers? Can they survive being trapped in a small box full of water? No, they probably can't. It made no sense how they survived that in the first place. And also, why did they know these creatures were coming? There was never any attempt to explain this connection that the creatures had. Did other animals have this heightened sense of awareness around these beasts? Where were the dogs? What happened to the cats? Were livestock affected? What was going on with the rest of the animals in the world? Were they all aware, and could they be used to fight these creatures somehow? At one earlier point during their desperate attempts to understand what was going on, one of the survivors actually insinuated that maybe North Korea was actually kind of instigating a chemical attack on the Western world. Was this actually the cause in the end? Was there more to it than this than meets the eye? And were these just hallucinations of a bunch of people that had their nerves affected by some awful chemical disaster? Are we all happy with the idea that a bunch of random demon spirits one day appeared and sentenced the world to death? And how did the guy from the supermarket genuinely know about all this mythological stuff? And why did people just take him at the word that the world had been overcome by a bunch of demons? It didn't really make sense that people just willingly accepted that as the truth verbatim. I guess some kind of chemical attack from another country would have made a whole lot more sense, but it was left open for interpretation. Finally, onto the last point. Are all blind people immune forever? Now, as you know, Mallory and boy and girl, that never gets boring saying that. Boy and girl, what was she thinking? They finally found their sanctuary in a home for the blind. They were kindly rescued and welcomed in by a bunch of people who somehow survived all these attacks. But are these people immune forever now? Will eventually these demon type creatures find a new way to get to people who've unfortunately lost their sight? And also, do different levels of eye deterioration affect the chances of being infected by these monsters? It was never really explained at any point. It left more questions than answers. Anyway guys, that's just my 10 strange questions. There was loads of random plot points that made no sense, and I just wish at times the director had made more of an effort to explain these. I do genuinely enjoy a bit of vagueness in a film where it's earned, but I felt these were often just kind of lazy plot points that they conveniently ignored. But it was a decent film and one worth checking out if you have got a Netflix subscription. Anyway, if you are new to this channel, make sure that you hit subscribe, and also go check out my Aquaman or Spider-Man reviews. I've been Steven, I'll see you soon.